So joining me today will be Palika. She is a program coordinator for Witnesses US focused work, where she helps communities document human rights violations in a safe and ethical way. And then we also have Teepee, and she is from the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. And for the past 10 years, she has dedicated her energy toward revitalizing the Lakota language, for Standing Rock's youngest citizens. So if they can come out and join me. Hello.
Doesn't matter.
So this is Teepee Ziwi, and this is Palika.
Hi, everyone. Hello.
So let's get right into it. Media is obviously overwhelmingly white and male, and that's slowly changing, but not as quickly as I would like. And one issue with that is when people are telling stories about communities or people who look like us, that presents challenges. So can you tell me about one glaring stereotype about your community or a community you've worked with and how that's portrayed in the media?
Sure. That's a really great question, because I think that people don't always realize that false or incomplete narratives about communities don't just lead to harmful stereotypes, but that those harmful stereotypes often help allow or inform racist and exclusionary public policies and laws. And so that's why it's so important to try to combat that work. A couple years ago, I had the privilege of working with an immigrant rights organization in New York called Make the Road, and I ran a workshop with 5 youth activists, all high school aged, and they were actually behind the scenes. They were the ones holding up the cameras, asking the questions, informing the narratives, and it was really important to them to try to combat these stereotypes, these harmful misrepresentations about immigrants in the US as being assumed criminals or ruining our economy or whatever false stories are being passed around. And so they actually made short films that ended up being screened at international film festivals, in high schools, in community groups, and even at the UN, that told their story about immigrating to the US and how difficult it is to be undocumented here in the US, and what the challenges are, and how hard it is to leave your culture and your language and oftentimes your families behind to come to the US and struggle socially and financially, and really get people to understand why immigrants have to leave their homes oftentimes because situations are unsafe and and not safe to live in to come to the US. So.
Right. And Teepee, being from the Standing Rock Indian Reservation, there was so much coverage about the protests there and so many ways that the narrative was being spun. Can you talk a little bit about a glaring example of a stereotype from those situations?
What really sticks out to me is the unfairness and the assumption of the American public to believe the media. And when you were down on ground level, you knew without a doubt that what was being reported out wasn't true at all. And so I think at that time, social media really became the avenue to get the real information out and to get the kind of help that we needed.
Right.
So to have our voice heard.
Right. So what was the portrayal of the protesters?
Oh my goodness, especially in North Dakota, we were really portrayed, our people and the supporters of Standing Rock were portrayed as very dangerous, very aggressive. North Dakota media and law enforcement kept on using the word public safety. Mm-hmm. We're worried about public safety, and there was these keywords that kept getting used. And one of the most insulting things is, for some reason, only in North Dakota, the media kept reporting about human waste being thrown at the law enforcement. But no one ever seen that. That never happened. But for some reason in North Dakota media, that was really important to keep saying over and over, as if I report it, then people might actually think it's true, and which is sadly the case sometimes.
Right. And so you did a really fascinating thing to challenge that stereotype and that narrative via social media by sharing an image of your home and inviting people to come and check it out for themselves. So can you tell the audience a little bit about that?
I did. I grew up along the Porcupine Creek. It's a tributary off of the Missouri River, so this was very personal to me. There's a couple pictures that this is my home. This is the Missouri. Sorry, I don't want to get emotional, but it's my home. And I shared a picture just of my home, of the river, nothing else, nobody, and just asking people to come be a witness and to stand for the water and stand for the world. And I asked that if you could come, then to please come, and please come and help, because it was scary. My home, my childhood home, is right along the Missouri, between where the pipeline is built across the Missouri, and then the drinking water intake for our tribe, along with millions of other people downriver. And my home is right between that. And so it was just really personal to me, very scary, disheartening. And so I put this call out, and a number of people who are valued allies actually came and shared that.
Shared 5,000 times, right?
Yes.
On Facebook.
Yeah, on Facebook. Over
photo of your
5,000.
home.
Yes, and people came.
Right. And so that was clearly an effective way for people to say, I see all this happening in the media. I don't really know what's going on, but I want to help. So I'm encouraged to go help. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about, the first video or image that you've seen that really inspired you to use social media as a tool for social justice. So Palika, can you tell me a little bit about your first video that inspired you?
Sure. The first video that I actually saw that inspired me or made me realize the potential of film for social justice work, I think I was in 7th or 8th grade, and I saw the film Hoop Dreams for the first time. And for people who aren't familiar, it's a documentary that takes place in Chicago in the mid-90s, and it follows the story of two young Black teenage boys who are from the city of Chicago. One grows up on the South Side, which is where I spent my entire first 18 years of my life, and the other grows up in a project housing neighborhood called Cabrini Green, and they ended up getting recruited by a predominantly white, wealthy high school in the suburbs to go play basketball, and the film follows their journey. And for me, it wasn't necessarily those overt moments of oppression and poverty that stick with me. What really sticks with me is that it was the first time in the media that I had seen a portrayal of a Black family in the project as being resilient and strong. There's one scene in particular where one of the boys, his family, they are at risk of getting their lights turned off because they can't pay the electricity bill that month. And all of their extended family and all of the community come together and help them pay their bill. And that little moment of resistance really is what sticks with me and what I think helps build more complete narratives about communities and about people. And that's what I always look for in the work that I do.
And so I think, hopefully this is working. I think both of those are successful examples of social media and images and video encouraging people to either understand someone who they don't look like or feel inspired to be proactive and help. Can you both tell me one dangerous thing about using social media for social justice activism and what people should be worried about, especially when it's so easy for us to take a photo or a video and share it online with thousands of people?
The surveillance, I think, that has come out in recent days regarding social media was really, under surveillance. And I have my own family members that are actually in the reports when they traveled from different places in the United States to come to Standing Rock, which is their home, to bring supplies and things to camp. And the media, The Intercept, who came out with the report, asked my brother if he would want his name redacted, and he said no, because he didn't do anything wrong. He brought supplies home, but also it's very. It feels very scary to know that he was actually followed, and that was all based on social media surveillance.
So people followed him after they saw his name in these reports?
Right.
Because they thought he had been doing something wrong?
Yeah, which is disheartening, knowing that when you make a stand for justice for your people and for your land and for your water, that's considered a threat on a federal level, and that there's surveillance happening at that level.
Right. And Palika, we've talked a little bit about, we live in a viral age where you put something on the internet and it goes viral and you feel good about yourself and you think that that's affecting change, but you think otherwise.
Well, I think that that's definitely an important way of trying to advocate for a community. We saw what happened in Standing Rock, putting calls out, getting those images and those stories shared. That's so important, especially when, as TP said, the local media or mainstream media wasn't necessarily covering these voices. But I think that as we've seen with the surveillance, and I feel like I scare people when I say this, but we know that FBI, that police officers, that they have people that check social media accounts and target activists and try to stay up on activists organizing and activity. And so for one, I think it's important to try to get our social media platforms to be accountable to us and transparent to us. But also something that I try to advise activists and anybody, citizens, human rights defenders, is to be careful about just live streaming an event or uploading something without first checking with the person who you filmed, or even thinking about your own safety, like thinking about, is your location service on? Are you exposing the identity of somebody with vulnerable immigration status? Are you exposing your own identity? What are the unintended harm that can come out of this? And instead, maybe talk to a lawyer, talk to the person's family, talk to a trusted source before just putting something out there.
Right. And so I think those are all good examples for people who are perhaps not well-versed in sharing things on social media for social justice. And we have a great question from the audience about how can non-media people help construct or change the media narrative about these different communities and cultures. So any suggestions or advice for people who are not in the media to challenge that?
I really think this is the day and age to be a critical thinker, to really push yourself, to not believe something at face value. Our president says it out loud, and we're supposed to assume it's true when we know it's not true. And so just really push and encourage people to use your creator-given skills and your intelligence to really critically think about things that matter to you.
Yeah, that absolutely. And just ask questions. If you see a piece of media, ask yourself, who made this? Who was behind the camera? Who paid for it? What was the intention here? Just be critical. In a world of fake news, I mean, we have to be critical.
Right, and I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier today about having discussions, right? So social media and sharing videos and photos is only one component, as you've said. But having those discussions with folks, talking to your friends, sharing questions and ideas about things you maybe don't understand about these groups is another way to help.
Definitely. I think conversations between people are really powerful, and you just need to be able to get that common ground and get that information out to each other. And I think just continually having conversations and dialogue about issues that really, really matter to you.
Right. And so, Palika, you've done a lot of video work. So let's talk about why video is sometimes the most effective. Maybe you can't have those conversations. Maybe you're afraid or unwilling to approach someone and talk about them. So why is video most effective for you in achieving social justice?
Yeah, I think that it's a close, well, maybe not close, but it comes second to actually having a face-to-face conversation. You know, when you watch someone give testimony or even watch cell phone footage of a human rights violation, like police violence or immigration violence, or you watch a documentary, you're not just watching the things that are being said, it's all of the other moments too that help build the picture. It's seeing the young child behind the police barricade. It's the body language, the facial expression. All of this helps build an idea and helps you better understand what's happening. And I think that that's something that can really only be communicated in person or via video. I think seeing is believing in a lot of ways, and that's why it's so important. But as we just said, it's also important to be critical media consumers. I mean, we know how easily videos can be manipulated and edited, and so we have to always be asking ourselves, who made this? Why did they make this? Where was the money? What was the intention?
Right. Is there any fear that we share things constantly? I've seen numerous videos, of police-involved shootings, of human rights violations. I'm sure you all have seen your fair share on Facebook, even when you don't want to. And I think that even in speaking with friends, some people just start to tune it out, or they view it as normal, or they see these images from protests and they just think, this is the norm, why should I care? Do either of you have fear that we are being inundated to the point of people giving up on being interested and caring about these issues?
That's a good one. I definitely, that there is a real threat in normalizing tragedy and normalizing human suffering when you can just bypass it. And
Right.
so just really, again, encourage people to be critical, to be engaged, to be intentional in your everyday lives, and
Right.
to be human being.
Right, and take those conversations offline,
Right.
you know, as you were saying earlier.
Yes.
And I think also just don't be discouraged if the video doesn't go viral. Sometimes it's not about how many eyes view something, but which eyes are viewing it. And being intentional about who your target audience is. Sometimes you want something to be seen by people with legislative power or people in your community. So it's not always, the intention isn't always just to go viral. Sometimes that's not even the most effective strategy.
Right. And so we're getting a few questions about allies and the importance of allies and how to be a good ally, whether through social media or otherwise. Any advice for those who want to help these communities, want to learn more, but are maybe white or don't have experience with the same things that these folks do?
The cool thing about that question is the word Lakota, and Dakota means allies. And I think the people right now, we need each other. We need allies. And the earth needs allies right now. And so we're just really, and it's better to have allies than enemies,
Right.
always. And I think that if you have an open heart, be willing to learn, be willing to do work. And as an educator, I know that when you're out of your comfort zone, that's when you do, that's when you do the real learning. And so be willing to get out of your comfort zone and be willing to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. But I think definitely in this day and age, we need allies, we need each other.
Right. So what about for people who don't know how to start the conversation? How do you start that conversation and say, without it seeming superficial or like you're exerting your privilege, how do you say, I want to help, I want to be an ally?
I always encourage people to look locally first. While these issues have been heightened by the new administration or more videos of police violence being shared over the past couple years, people didn't just start organizing around racial justice 2 years ago. This has been going on for a very long time, and more times than not, if you just look to your local community, there's places that you can coalition build with instead of just starting something new, and organizers and activists and people that you can learn from and will help bring you in and have those conversations and help root you in the history and your community. And for me, that's how I've continued to be involved in this space, is just really learning from people on the ground who have been in this work and have been doing this work for a very long time.
And obviously using social media, one danger is this idea of quote unquote slacktivism, right? You just share tweets or hashtags, and that's viewed as superficially helping these communities. Is there one really effective strategy to using social media to uplift these voices, to be an ally?
That's a question that I get asked a lot. And on one hand, yeah, I think I can see the kind of harm in promoting slacktivism, but then sometimes I think, okay, well, for example, the hashtag Black Lives Matter got passed around so much that it was something that every presidential candidate had to engage with. And that's a victory to me. That's a very small victory in the long, in the scope of things, but that's important. Changing public perception and opinions, I mean, that doesn't happen overnight, and that happens with these little small, changes and more presence in the media, so.
Right. Well, and before we go, time is just about up. I know you wanted to acknowledge.
I want to acknowledge the Piscataway tribal people whose homelands that we are on. And I also want to acknowledge the tribal indigenous people in the audience and online, because we are still here.
Well, thank you both so much. I'm sure if anyone wants to continue the conversation, they can do that with you afterwards. So thank you. Thanks, everyone.